Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to dive headfirst into the absolutely fascinating world of open source intelligence. We're going to look at exactly how professional investigators pull the digital thread on public government records to map out massive corporate structures, trace hidden financial assets, and uncover incredibly complex networks. So let's just jump right in. So how do investigators actually uncover hidden corporate empires using just a standard web browser? Now, it might sound a bit like Hollywood magic, right? You know the trope, a lone investigator sitting in a dark room, typing furiously on a keyboard with green text flying across the screen to crack a massive case. But the reality is actually much more structured, and honestly, in many ways, it's way more interesting. The truth is that literally anyone can uncover massive financial trails and hidden relationships if they just know exactly which public government databases to look in, and more importantly, how to connect the dots. To understand exactly how this works, we're going to follow a 5-step investigative workflow today. Number 1. The OSINT mindset. 2. Tracing digital breadcrumbs. 3. Uncovering corporate empires. 4. Digging into government records. And finally, number 5. Visualizing hidden relationships.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, the OSINT mindset.
The entire core of this kind of work revolves around a concept called OSINT, which stands for Open Source Intelligence. Basically, OSINT is all about taking openly accessible data and piecing it together to create a really comprehensive intelligence picture. The absolutely crucial point here is that this relies entirely on publicly available sources. There is zero hacking involved, none. Investigators are simply pulling from government publications, news articles, business registries, and court records. And they're doing it all without violating any legal or ethical boundaries whatsoever.
Professional investigators often use a structured methodology, much like the MIT ATTK matrix. Now, that's a famous framework used by cybersecurity professionals to understand how hackers operate, but the principles apply perfectly here, particularly the reconnaissance phase. Professionals don't just sit down and guess what to search for. They systematically gather data on targeted organizations. They hunt for user emails. They map out network infrastructure, and they look for open vulnerabilities. It is a highly methodical, step-by-step process designed to literally leave no stone unturned.
Moving on to Section 2, tracing digital breadcrumbs.
Every investigation has to start somewhere, right? And that somewhere is usually a digital footprint. Investigators are initially looking for things like corporate email addresses, domain registrations, or IP addresses. Now, what's really interesting about this phase is the toolset. Professionals don't just Google things manually all day. They use automated software programs, tools with names like Spiderfoot, the Harvester, or ReconNG. These tools can scour the internet to bulk collect this kind of data in seconds. Just finding a single corporate email address sitting on a random web forum or buried in a data breach gives an investigator that vital first thread to start pulling.
That brings us to Section 3, uncovering corporate empires.
So once we have a name, a domain, or an email, we can pivot directly to business records to find out who is actually pulling the strings behind a corporation. One of the absolute most powerful tools in an investigator's arsenal is a completely free platform called Open Corporates. The reason this tool is such a game changer is that it indexes corporate data from all 50 US states and dozens of international jurisdictions. So instead of hunting through 50 different clunky state websites one by one, an investigator uses Open Corporates to instantly identify owners, board members, and historical registered addresses. It actually scrapes data directly from primary government websites. This means it often retains historical records even if a company desperately tries to scrub its current website clean.
Now, if we're dealing with publicly traded companies, the ultimate goldmine is the SEC EDGAR portal. This is a U.S. government interface providing free access to over 21 million company financial filings. 21 million! Through EDGAR, an investigator can pull annual reports, check subsidiary disclosures, review exactly what executives are being compensated, and see who the beneficial owners of massive corporate entities really are. It's wild because it is absolute transparency, just hiding in plain sight.
Section 4, digging into government records.
Okay, identifying the corporate entities is really just step 1. Next, professionals have to cross-reference these entities with regional and federal government records. Take a look at that number, 800 million. That is the number of federal court documents held by PACER, the Public Access to Court Electronic Records System. For literally just 10 cents a page, an investigator can track the entire civil, criminal, and bankruptcy litigation history of a person or company anywhere across the United States. Court documents are frankly incredible sources of intelligence because the parties involved are legally compelled to disclose facts under oath that they would otherwise keep entirely secret.
The crucial skill here is knowing exactly which tool to use for which specific type of record. We just mentioned Pacer for federal courts, but consider Muckrock. Investigators use this tool to essentially bury government agencies with Freedom of Information Act requests. This legally forces the agencies to release internal documents, which Muckrock then publishes for anyone to see. If you want to neutrally track campaign contributions or map out relationships between powerful organizations and political figures, a tool like LittleSys is totally invaluable. And for tracing global money laundering, OCCRP Aleph lets journalists and investigators follow the money right across international borders.
But listen, you should never ever underestimate the power of local and regional records. Federal databases are great, for sure, but it is so often the county tax assessor or a municipal building board that holds the real smoking gun. When targets are trying to hide their assets, they often completely forget that property taxes still have to be paid. Local construction permits still require real names and physical addresses. So pivoting from a corporate name over to a local property tax record is a classic, highly effective OSINT technique.
Finally, Section 5, Visualizing Hidden Relationships.
Honestly, gathering hundreds of pages of court documents and tax records is practically useless unless you can actually connect the dots. This is what investigators call the art of pulling the thread. Let me give you a really cool real-world example from our source material. An investigator started a case with absolutely nothing but an email address found in a public data breach. That single email connected to a real name on a compromised LinkedIn profile. By searching that specific name in other public databases, it linked directly to a driver's license number. Well, it turned out that very driver's license had been scanned and stored by a mortgage company that later suffered a ransomware attack. This suddenly revealed the target's physical property and entire financial history. Just one compromised email cascaded into a completely unmasked profile.
When you start overlapping this kind of raw property data with corporate filings, you enter the realm of FinTint, or financial intelligence. By meticulously tracking these public records, investigators can clearly map the flow of money through dummy corporations and shell companies. It lets them identify fraudulent activities or tax evasion simply by analyzing the completely public paper trail. Now, to actually make sense of all this overwhelming data, professionals use what's called link analysis. They use software like Maltego to take hundreds of boring text-heavy public records and transform them into a highly visual graph. In the software, people, companies, and addresses become data points called nodes. The relationships between them, like say two supposedly unrelated companies actually sharing the same registered address, become connecting lines called edges. Instantly, the software highlights the most influential hubs in a network, showing you exactly who the key players are in a really complex corporate web.
So what really separates the true professionals from the rest of us? Well, it all comes down to one word: corroboration. An amateur does a quick Google search and just accepts whatever pops up on the first page as the absolute truth. A professional OSINT investigator, they never trust a single source. If they find a name, they verify it against a business registry. They check the SEC filings, they pull the Pacer court dockets, and they look at historic property tax records. They rigorously cross-reference absolutely everything. Now that you understand the immense power of combining these open-source tools, business registries, court dockets, property taxes, and link analysis software, it really makes you think, doesn't it? With so much data legally and freely available to anyone who knows where to look, it's definitely worth asking, just how visible is your own digital footprint to a trained investigator today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's out there.